Mixed messages. The first Taiwan office to open in Europe in nearly 2 decades. But why does the EU seem to be bowing to pressure from China? In our defence, we take a look at where the US, Canada and Australia stand when it comes to defending Taiwan. Celebrating bravery. A jailed Chinese citizen journalist who first reported on the virus in Wuhan wins a prestigious International Press Freedom Award. Plus, a new audience. We'll tell you how some Golden Horse Award-winning movies are being made accessible for the visually impaired. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Taiwan's representative office in Lithuania opened on Thursday, and for the first time for a European country, the word Taiwanese is in its name. While it indicates a higher degree of recognition, other developments in the European Union show the bloc continues to weigh its relations with China in its engagement with Taipei. James Chater reports.
A small but significant symbol of Taiwan's deepening relationship with Europe. The Taiwanese representative office in Lithuania opened its doors on Thursday, the first in Europe since 2003. And just as significant, the only one on the continent to include the word Taiwanese in its official name.
台湾跟立陶宛在半导体、雷射、金融科技等各项的产业领域都有庞大的合作潜力。未来我们也会在持续在共享的核心价值上来致力促进双方人民的友谊。
From Beijing, familiar fury. A Chinese foreign ministry statement called the opening egregious and warned that Lithuania will be responsible for all the ensuing consequences. It's this kind of reaction that's led the EU to tread cautiously with Taiwan. Recently blossoming EU-Taiwan ties hit a road bump this week after a report in the Hong Kong-based South China Morning Post revealed that EU plans to announce a new strategic approach to Taiwan were postponed at the last minute. It's a sign that Taiwan's path forward in Europe won't be without its obstacles.
In order to strengthen and have a comprehensive relationship with Taiwan, we have to remember that there's different voices, and what stays at the core of the European Union is to find a balance and a compromise and a consensus among the different actors pushing for a more robust relationship.
A key component is semiconductors. Some estimates suggest the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company produces around half of all chips globally. On Thursday, the Vice President of the European Commission said the bloc may begin subsidizing semiconductor production, and that the EU cannot rely on one company or country for its chip supply.
Each case for the supply of semiconductors will be rigorously assessed based on their own respective merits, so as to ensure that a project have a European nature and, of course, avoid a subsidy race within the Union and beyond.
Earlier this month, the first official European Parliament delegation to visit Taiwan held discussions on misinformation and technology, with this reassurance from the French MEP Raphael Glucksmann.
You are not alone.
Analysts say the postponement of an upgrade in relations doesn't necessarily mean a reversal of EU policy.
Given the difficulties, I expect that there will be a lot more bumps on the road ahead, and I am not disappointed to see and read news that we're not moving as fast as expected, perhaps, but wrongly expected, because I think, being realistic, it will be a difficult, long process ahead. It is a working process, and this is how the European Union works.
In Lithuania, a win for Taipei. In Brussels, a setback. While the overall trend for Taiwan in Europe appears to be positive, with the shadow of China looming over relations, for now, Taiwan may have to contend with a rhythm of one step forward, one step back. Patrick Chen and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
There are more calls for US backing for Taiwan, with the latest from a government committee report recommending increased military support and arms sales. While the White House follows a policy of strategic ambiguity toward Taiwan, meaning it doesn't say whether the US will actually come to Taiwan's defense in a China attack, US defense agencies are calling for more aggressive measures. Bing Wang reports.
Armored vehicles stand guard near the Danshui River in Taipei. The goal of their exercise is to block a maritime invasion. This drill is called anti-decapitation.
斩首行动也有可能，也有可能包括他宣告封锁，也有可能包括这个联合的火力打击。那最后当然要等。那你想一下，那所以我们当然要有防卫的决心。
Taiwan is looking for allies to deter a possible attack from China. And it's a point highlighted this week by an independent agency of the U.S. government. The U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Committee has released its annual report calling for increased military support and arms sales to Taiwan. Last week, a delegation of U.S. senators visited Taiwan, underlined military and economic cooperation between the two sides. More than once in recent weeks, President Joe Biden has appeared to signal that the United States would come to Taiwan's defense in the event of an attack. But each time, the administration has walked back the comments to reiterate the long-standing policy of strategic ambiguity. And this, along with Taiwan's status, was once again a question hanging over Monday's virtual summit between China and the U.S. presidents.
No, I said that they have to decide. They, Taiwan, not us. And we are not encouraging independence. We're encouraging that they do exactly what the Taiwan Act requires. And that's what we're doing. Let them make up their mind, period.
Taiwan has always maintained it alone is responsible for its security. The country's defense spending has greatly increased over the past 3 years, in particular on U.S. arms packages.
And from recent years, actually, Taiwan spent a lot of money. The GDP, the defense budget or GDP is 2.36% right now. Still pretty low. However, just about 3 or 4 years ago, it's below 2%. So it's been increased significantly.
The Jiayi Air Force Base on Thursday unveiled a fleet of retrofitted F-16V fighter jets. The upgrades make Taiwan's Air Force the first in the world to have a combat-ready fleet of F-16Vs.
我们有我们的空军不分昼夜，在蓝天中默默保护国人安全。我和国人都很安心，因为我们知道，不管任何的侵扰，各位都能够立即升空拦截驱离，展现我们捍卫领空的决心。
There was no breakthrough on the Taiwan issue at Biden's virtual summit with China's Xi Jinping this week, nor was one expected. All sides will hope that the U.S. commitment to Taiwan's defense will never be put to the ultimate test. Chris Ma and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's foreign minister has told Sky News Australia that Taipei would never ask Australia to enter a war on its behalf, but that any help would be treasured. Joseph Wu made the comments in an interview for a documentary called China Rising, which aired in Australia this week. It charts China's growing power and considers the potential of China taking Taiwan by force if necessary. In the two-part special, Australia's Defence Minister Peter Dutton outlined his country's position. In the event of an attack by China, he says the US and its allies, including Australia, would be forced to respond. Debate is raging across Australian media over whether the country would come to the defence of Taiwan. For more on this, I spoke to Roger Huang, a researcher at Australia's Macquarie University, specialising in security issues in East and Southeast Asia.
And this is really more in relation of Australia's relationship to the United States. I think there's been a recognition from the strategic minds in Australia that Taiwan, in fact, is an important strategic interest of Australia. Even if there are no actual legal obligations for Australia to step in, it is impossible and inconceivable to see that Australia would not side with the United States in a war over Taiwan. No one wants to actually see Taiwan in actual war, first and foremost, and so that if there was a war, it would be important to make sure that China is not able to just basically waltz in, right? That we want to defend the current system that has allowed peace since 1945. So again, Australia plays a very important role in maintaining the current order in the Indo-Pacific. Australia is also willing to basically go all out in its continued support of the US-led order, and also demonstrate its willingness to play an upgraded role, right?
In Australia itself, the Australian public, what sort of feeling is there amongst Australians to defend, a democratic, pluralistic society, Taiwan, which is about the same population as Australia itself? What is the feeling amongst Australians?
So there's all these things that were perceived as kind of these Chinese arrogance and misunderstanding of Australian democracy and values and whatnot. And that, I think, has, what we've seen now, this rhetoric of preventing China's continued expansion and influence in Australia and Indo-Pacific, as well as potential war over Taiwan, is all a reflection of this greater kind of perhaps insecurity, if you like to use that word, but also just this mistrust of Chinese intentions and how the Chinese authoritarian model and it's kind of it's trying to push through its agenda in Australia and elsewhere makes kind of peace-loving, if you want to use that term, peace-loving pro-democracy Australians very uneasy of the direction that China's taking. Again, I think a lot of it is there's also this great distrust specifically coming from China that's leading to a renewed interest and support for Taiwan.
The research arm of Taiwan's military is conducting a series of missile tests in the south of the island, and they are attracting public attention. The National Zhongshan Institute of Science and Technology is testing the Tiangong missile in the cities of Taidong and Pingdong. The first launches last night drew crowds from as far as Taipei. Tests will take place every week and will continue until December 3rd. Officials have reassured the public that there will be a safety distance of at least a few hundred kilometers. US President Joe Biden hosted Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador on Thursday for the first North American summit in 5 years. Biden is aiming to improve US ties with its northern and southern neighbors after relations soured under predecessor Donald Trump. Items on the agenda include immigration, trade, pandemic recovery, and competing with an increasingly assertive China. Obrador warned that North American countries would be headed for an unacceptable imbalance of economic power with Beijing.
De mantenerse la tendencia de la última década, en otros 30 años, para el 2051, China tendría el dominio del 42% del mercado mundial. Y nosotros, Estados Unidos, México y Canadá, nos quedaríamos con el 12%, lo cual, además de ser una desproporción inaceptable en el terreno económico, mantendría viva la tentación de apostar a resolver esa disparidad con el uso de la fuerza, lo cual nos pondría en peligro a todos. Por eso, lo mejor, lo más conveniente, es fortalecer nuestras economías, fortalecernos comercialmente en América del Norte y en todo el continente.
Despite being a Pacific nation and a traditional ally of the United States, Canada has been left out of recent US-led initiatives in the Indo-Pacific region. To learn why, TaiwanPlus reporter Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick spoke with Michael Chong, Shadow Foreign Minister with the Conservative Party, Canada's official opposition.
It was only several years ago that they began their time in government in late 2015, promising much closer engagement with the People's Republic of China, promising to broaden and deepen the relationship. They proposed a free trade agreement with the People's Republic of China. However, the leadership in Beijing did not reciprocate, in fact, did quite the opposite and showed increasing hostility toward Canadians and toward Canadian interests. They, as you know, detained Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor for more than 2 years. In addition to that, they imposed arbitrary bans on Canadian pork, beef, and canola products, and took a number of other hostile measures. Since then, the government has acknowledged these threats coming from the leadership in Beijing, but has failed to act. As a result, I think many of Canada's allies and partners throughout the Indo-Pacific region aren't sure what Canada's approach is, and that's why I think you've seen us excluded from initiatives like the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. It's the reason why we've been excluded from AUKUS. We think it's high time for the Canadian government to come forward with a new plan, a new policy on China that acknowledges the very, very real threats that China is presenting in the Indo-Pacific region.
And in terms of that new framework, what would you and your party like that to look like?
Well, I think the framework should be much more multilateral. The framework should see Canada line up much more closely with our democratic allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific region. We need to cooperate much more closely. We need to work much more multilaterally with these democratic partners and allies. The fact of the matter is that Canada is not a superpower. We are a small country of some 37 million people. We are not an economic powerhouse like the European Union or the United States or China. We must work multilaterally. And so I would like to see us work toward joining the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, work closely with the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia. And I would like us to work more closely on other areas of cooperation. I think Taiwan's interest in joining the Comprehensive Agreement, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, would be a welcome move, strengthening our relationship with Taiwan. Canada should withdraw from the Beijing-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, particularly in light of the comments coming from the leadership of the organization that indicated that it would be willing to extend financing to the illegitimate regime in Myanmar. We think that these are some of the things that a new framework should include.
Coming up after the break, a Press Freedom Award honors the courage of a Chinese citizen journalist jailed for reporting on the coronavirus outbreak in Wuhan. Details in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Imprisoned Chinese journalist Zhang Jian has won one of this year's Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Prizes for journalistic courage. The lawyer turned citizen journalist reported from Wuhan during the early stages of the coronavirus outbreak, streaming updates on social media. Authorities arrested Zhang and later sentenced her to 4 years on a charge often used against dissidents. For more on the Press Freedom Awards, our reporter Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick asked Reporters Without Borders East Asia Bureau Chief Cedric Alviani why Zhang Jian deserves this honor.
Zhang Jian is an extraordinary courageous journalist. At the time of the COVID-19 outbreak, in China 2 years ago. She noticed that information was very scarce due to censorship, and she decided to go by herself to Wuhan to investigate on this virus. It's very courageous because at that time she had no idea how the virus could be transmitted, and she was truly taking a risk to inform the Chinese people on what was really happening in Wuhan. She was arrested and she was sentenced to a 4-year prison term, which is outrageous considering that she was only performing her duty as a journalist. As a way to protest, Zhang Jian is conducting a partial hunger strike. This is out of despair because she has no other way to protest her innocence. And unfortunately, her health condition has deteriorated a lot. We fear that she would die very soon if the Chinese regime does not release her.
Zhang Jian was not the only citizen journalist who was arrested for covering the initial outbreak in Wuhan, although her sentence is extraordinarily severe. What do you think the government is trying to say by punishing a citizen journalist so severely?
In 2021, it's becoming incredibly harder for the Chinese people to receive information that is not the official narrative of the party. The problem with such an attitude from the government is that censorship does not solve problems. Censorship cannot hide a virus outbreak. Censorship can only make things worse by trying to conceal the problems. It's important to notice that censorship in China is not only the problem of the people in China. It can have consequences everywhere in the world, as we could see with the COVID-19 outbreak, that possibly could not have been that serious if the authorities had not censored the whistleblowers and the journalists who tried to report on it in the very beginning.
Here in Taiwan, the Cabinet has approved a 4% salary raise for public sector workers. Around 1 million civil servants, teachers, military personnel and contract workers stand to benefit from the raise. But the news comes as popular restaurant chains in Taiwan, including McDonald's, Subway and Din Tai Fung, announce they are raising the price of some menu items up to 3%. The 58th Annual Golden Horse Awards are just a week away in Taipei. In the lead-up, the film festival organisers have undertaken a unique collaboration to make some of its past winners more accessible to visually impaired audiences. Ken Ning has more.
Scenes from the award-winning film My Missing Valentine. It garnered 5 Golden Horse Awards at last year's ceremony, becoming the biggest winner of the night. Now the film has been adapted for the visually impaired community in Taiwan. At a premiere in visual cinemas in Taipei, visually impaired moviegoers were treated to a narrated screening of this movie, and another Golden Horse winner, Dear Tenet, along with some of his actors.
让我非常感动的就是在过程当中我听到非常详实的描述。在刚开始的前半我都是一直闭着眼睛去听所有的描述，然后演到一半的时候我实在忍不住睁开眼睛，因为他讲得太精彩。
我希望他叫你，我要叫你痛哭。你为什么有那么多秘密？那为什么你不跟我讲真的事情？
It's a collaboration between the Golden Horse Film Festival, the Ministry of Culture, and the Audio Description Development Association, in an effort to make these critically acclaimed films more accessible to a community who doesn't usually get to experience the way they should.
我们也希望有选择性。那第二个是能够可近性，就是在就近的居住地区也能够有相关的这一些设备，不用每次都要跑这么远，然后来参与这样的活动。
It requires around 3 months and a cost of up to $7,000 to produce a narrative version of the films, and professionals who can do this are in short supply. Nonetheless, the association hopes audio description can become more widespread so that people with visual impairments can enjoy movies in a cinema more often. Klein Wang and Ken Ning for TaiwanPlus.
The first TaiwanPlus Film Festival is now online. A total of 10 award-winning Taiwanese films are available for free at TaiwanPlus.com through the end of the year. Global viewers in select areas will be able to see 3 classic movies by director Ang Lee, known as the Father Knows Best trilogy, as well as masterpieces from the 1960s.
你是不是不喜欢我？
很抱歉。你有没有爱过一个恨你的人？
什么叫爱过？
我们一定上辈子见过面，但是没看够。没有人能替代你。世界上一定风行的事不是没有，但是绝不能把生活中没有遭遇过的经历，错误的把它当成是爱情。
你到底有没有自己的主见？
真正的爱情是跟一个关心你的人在一起，这个人可以让你表达内心的感受。
别人拿就自己谈恋爱的权利，为什么要这样分恋人？
我了解。Me too.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. We'll leave you with some images of the annual red crab migration on Christmas Island. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.